The fluorescent lights of Los Angeles International Airport hummed above me as I stood in front of a small flower kiosk, carefully selecting a bouquet of red roses mixed with white lilies, Derek's favorites. 8 years of marriage had taught me every little detail about the man I loved: his preference for lilies over carnations, the way he took his coffee with exactly 2 sugars, how he always slept on the left side of the bed. I smiled at the thought of his face when I walked through our front door 2 days early, flowers in hand, ready to spend a romantic weekend together. "Those are beautiful," the elderly woman behind the counter said, wrapping the stems in delicate pink tissue paper. "Someone special?" "My husband," I replied, feeling that familiar warmth spread through my chest. "I've been away for a week on business and I wanted to surprise him." She handed me the bouquet with a knowing smile. "He's a lucky man." I thanked her and made my way toward the departure gate, my carry-on rolling behind me. The Los Angeles trip had been exhausting, but successful. As the senior marketing director for Lumiere Cosmetics, I had spent the past 7 days negotiating a partnership with a major West Coast retailer that would expand our distribution by 40%. My boss, Jonathan, had already sent 3 emails congratulating me on closing the deal ahead of schedule. But none of that mattered as much as getting home to Derek. I found a seat near the window and pulled out my phone, scrolling through our text conversation from the past few days. His messages had been short lately: "Busy day, talk later," and "Miss you too, babe." But I attributed that to his hectic schedule. Derek was a real estate agent, one of the top performers at Morrison & Associates, and the Chicago market had been particularly competitive this quarter. We were both driven people, which was part of what made our relationship work. We understood each other's ambitions. At least, I thought we did. My phone buzzed with an incoming call, and I smiled when I saw Nina's name on the screen. Nina Chen had been my best friend since our freshman year at Northwestern, the kind of friend who knew all my secrets and loved me anyway. "Please tell me you're about to board a plane," she said, without preamble. 20 minutes, I confirmed. "I cannot wait to get home. This hotel bed has been killing my back." "And how's Derek handling being a bachelor for the week?" Something in her tone made me pause. "What do you mean?" "Nothing. Nothing." She laughed, but it sounded forced. "I just ran into him at Whole Foods yesterday. He seemed distracted." "He's been stressed about work," I said, though a tiny seed of unease planted itself in my stomach. "You know how he gets when he's chasing a big commission." "Right, of course." Nina cleared her throat. "Anyway, I'm sure he'll be thrilled to see you. Call me when you land." "Will do." I ended the call and stared at my phone for a moment, trying to shake off the strange feeling that had settled over me. Nina was probably just being Nina. She had never been Derek's biggest fan, though she'd never given me a concrete reason why. "I just get a vibe," she'd said once, years ago. I had dismissed it as overprotectiveness. The boarding announcement crackled over the speakers, and I gathered my things, pushing the conversation out of my mind. I was going home to my husband, to our beautiful brownstone in Lincoln Park, to the life we had built together. Everything was fine. Everything was perfect. The flight to Chicago was uneventful, giving me 4 hours to catch up on emails and review the quarterly reports that had been piling up in my inbox. Somewhere over Nevada, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone instead. Pictures from our honeymoon in Santorini, from Derek's surprise birthday party 2 years ago, from lazy Sunday mornings spent in bed with coffee and the New York Times crossword puzzle. We had met at a charity gala 9 years ago. I was 25 and freshly promoted, feeling out of place among the wealthy donors in their designer gowns. Derek had appeared at my elbow with 2 glasses of champagne and a self-deprecating joke about his rental tuxedo. By the end of the night, I was convinced I had found my person. He proposed on the 1-year anniversary of that first meeting, on the same rooftop where we had shared our first kiss. The ring was modest. He was still building his career then, but I would have said yes to a ring made of paper. I loved him. Completely, wholly, without reservation. When had things started to change? I tried to pinpoint the moment, but it was like trying to catch smoke. There was no dramatic shift, no explosive argument, just a gradual cooling. So slow, I almost didn't notice it happening. Derek started working later. He bought a second phone for work contacts, He stopped reaching for me in bed. I told myself it was normal. All marriages went through phases. We were busy professionals navigating demanding careers. The spark would come back when things settled down, but things never seemed to settle down. The plane touched down at O'Hare just after 9 in the evening, and I practically sprinted through the terminal, eager to be home. I had texted Derek from LA saying I would be back Thursday, which meant I had 2 full days to surprise him. Maybe I would cook his favorite dinner tomorrow night, the mushroom risotto that took 3 hours but was worth every minute. Maybe we could finally have that conversation about our future, about whether we were ready to start trying for a baby. The Uber driver was a chatty man named Marcus who spent the entire ride telling me about his daughter's college applications. I nodded along, clutching the flowers in my lap, watching the familiar Chicago skyline grow closer through the window. The city looked beautiful at night, all glittering lights and endless possibility. When we turned onto our street, I noticed Derek's BMW in the driveway. Good. He was home. But there was another car parked behind it. A white Audi I didn't recognize. Probably a colleague, I reasoned. Derek sometimes brought clients home to review paperwork in his office. "This is perfect, thank you," I told Marcus, handing him a generous tip. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment after he drove away, looking up at our house. The brownstone had been a stretch when we bought it 5 years ago, but Derek had insisted. "It's an investment," he'd said, "and you deserve the best." I had let him handle most of the financial details. He was the real estate expert, after all. The living room light was on, casting a warm glow through the curtains. I could see shadows moving inside. I walked up the front steps, my heart light with anticipation. The key slid into the lock smoothly, and I pushed the door open, already rehearsing my surprise greeting. "Derek, The words died in my throat. There, on our living room couch, the cream-colored sectional we had picked out together from Restoration Hardware, was my husband. But he wasn't alone. A woman with long dark hair was straddling his lap, her blouse unbuttoned, her lips pressed against his neck. The flowers slipped from my fingers. The sound of the bouquet hitting the hardwood floor made them both freeze. Derek's head snapped toward the doorway, his eyes going wide with shock. The woman, young, beautiful, wearing what I now realized was one of my favorite necklaces around her throat, scrambled off him with a gasp. "Lauren!" Derek's voice cracked. "You're not supposed to be home until Thursday." I couldn't speak, couldn't move. My entire body had turned to stone while my mind struggled to process what I was seeing. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. "Baby, listen to me," Derek said, standing up and straightening his shirt. "This isn't what it looks like." A hysterical laugh escaped my lips. "It isn't what it looks like? You have another woman in our house, on our couch, wearing my grandmother's necklace. And it isn't what it looks like?" The woman, girl, really, she couldn't have been more than 28, had the decency to look ashamed. She was fumbling with her buttons, avoiding my gaze. "Who is she?" My voice came out steadier than I expected, cold and hard as ice. Derek ran a hand through his hair. A nervous habit I knew all too well. "Her name is Megan. She's a client." "A client." I repeated the word like it was poison. "Do you provide this level of service to all your clients, Derek?" "Lauren, please." "How long?" He hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. How long? Megan spoke for the first time, her voice small and trembling. 8 months. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. 8 months. 8 months of lies, of deception, of coming home to a man who was living an entirely separate life behind my back. "I think you should leave," I said to Megan, my voice barely above a whisper. She grabbed her purse and practically ran for the door, pausing only to shoot Derek a look I couldn't interpret. The front door slammed behind her, leaving me alone with the stranger who wore my husband's face. "Lauren, baby, I know this looks bad," Derek started, taking a step toward me. "Don't." I held up my hand. "Don't you dare call me baby." He stopped, his expression shifting from panic to something almost like annoyance. "Fine. You want to do this now? Let's do this. You want to know why I found comfort in someone else's arms? Because my wife is never home. Because I spend every night alone in this house while you're off conquering the corporate world. Because I can't remember the last time you looked at me the way you look at your quarterly reports. So this is my fault? The anger was building now, hot and righteous, burning away the shock. I work hard so we can have this life, this house. These things you insisted we needed, and you repay me by sleeping with your client? She listens to me, Derek shouted. She makes me feel like I matter. You matter to me, I shot back. You have always mattered to me. But apparently that wasn't enough. The fight went on for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Derek cycled through every excuse in the book. He was lonely. He was stressed. Megan understood him in ways I couldn't. Each justification was more pathetic than the last. Finally, exhausted and numb, I asked the question I wasn't sure I wanted answered. What happens now? Derek straightened his shoulders, and something cold flickered in his eyes. I want a divorce, Lauren. Megan and I, we're serious. She's pregnant. The world went silent. Pregnant. The word echoed in my head like a death knell. I want to keep the house, Derek continued, as if he hadn't just detonated a bomb in the middle of my life. It's only fair, since I found it, and Megan and I will need the space for the baby. I stared at him. This man I had loved, had built a life with, had trusted completely, and saw him clearly for the first time in years. I need to leave, I heard myself say. I can't be here right now. I turned and walked out the front door, leaving behind the flowers scattered on the floor, the house full of memories, and the shattered remains of everything I thought I knew. My phone buzzed in my pocket as I stood on the dark street, not knowing where to go or what to do next. I pulled it out with trembling hands and saw a text from my mother in Tampa. Thinking of you, sweetheart. Call me anytime. I'm always here. I pressed the call button and waited. Mom? My voice broke on the single syllable. I need to come home. The drive to Nina's apartment was a blur of streetlights and tears. I don't remember calling her. Don't remember getting into my car. Don't remember anything except the overwhelming need to be somewhere safe, somewhere that didn't smell like Derek's cologne or contain memories of the life I thought I had. Nina was waiting at her front door when I pulled up, still wearing her pajamas at 10:30 on a Tuesday night. She took one look at my face and pulled me into her arms without a word. I knew it. She whispered into my hair. I knew something was wrong. I should have said something sooner. I pulled back to look at her. You knew? Her face crumpled with guilt. I didn't know, no. I saw him a few times. With a woman. I told myself I was imagining things, that there had to be an explanation. I didn't want to hurt you without being sure. When? My voice was hollow. When did you see them? 3 months ago. They were at that Italian place on Clark Street, the one with the good tiramisu. She led me inside, guiding me to her worn leather couch. They looked close, but I thought maybe it was a colleague or something. Derek introduced her when they walked past my table. Said she was a new agent at his firm. Her name is Megan, I said flatly. She's a client. And apparently she's been sleeping with my husband for 8 months. Nina's sharp intake of breath filled the silence. Oh, Lauren. She's pregnant, Nina. She's having his baby. The words felt foreign in my mouth, like I was reciting lines from someone else's tragedy. How had my life turned into a Lifetime movie? Just this morning, I had been planning romantic dinners and conversations about our future. Now I was sitting on my best friend's couch, learning that the man I had married was having a child with another woman. Tell me everything, Nina said, curling up next to me with a blanket. From the beginning. So I did. I told her about the flowers and the surprise and the car in the driveway. I told her about Megan wearing my grandmother's necklace, about the excuses Derek made, about his cold demand for the house. With each detail, the reality settled deeper into my bones, replacing the numbness with something sharper. He blamed me, I said when I finished. He said I was never home, that I made him feel like he didn't matter, like somehow his affair was my fault. That's abuser logic, Nina said firmly. He made a choice. He could have talked to you, suggested counseling, asked for a divorce like a decent human being. Instead, he lied to you for 8 months and let you believe everything was fine. She was right. I knew she was right. But somewhere deep inside, a treacherous voice whispered that maybe Derek had a point. Maybe I had been too focused on work. Maybe I had neglected our relationship without realizing it. Stop. Nina's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. I can see you doing it. You're trying to find a way to blame yourself, and I won't let you. Derek is a grown man who made terrible decisions. That's on him, not you. I nodded, but the guilt remained, a constant companion to my grief. My phone had been buzzing continuously since I left the house. Texts and calls from Derek that I refused to answer. But around midnight, a message from an unknown number caught my attention. Lauren, this is Megan. I know you probably hate me, and you have every right to. But there are things you should know. Things Derek hasn't told you. Please call me. I showed the message to Nina, who raised an eyebrow. That's bold. Should I respond? That's your call. But honestly, I'd want to know what she has to say. Against my better judgment, I typed a response. What things? The reply came immediately, as if Megan had been staring at her phone waiting. Not over text. Can we meet? Tomorrow morning? I'll come wherever you want. I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop in Wicker Park, a neutral location far from Derek's house. Then I turned off my phone and let Nina make me chamomile tea while we watched mindless television until I finally fell asleep on her couch. The next morning arrived gray and cold, a fitting match for my mood. I borrowed some of Nina's clothes and drove to the coffee shop, arriving 15 minutes early. I needed the time to prepare myself, to build up my defenses against whatever fresh hell Megan was about to unleash. She arrived precisely at 10, looking younger and more fragile than she had the night before. Without the dramatic lighting and shock of the moment, I could see that she was pretty in a conventional way. Long, dark hair, wide brown eyes, a smattering of freckles across her nose. She looked like someone's daughter, someone's friend, someone who had made a terrible mistake. Thank you for meeting me, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. I know I have no right to ask anything of you. Then why am I here? Megan took a deep breath. Because I think Derek has been lying to both of us. She pulled out her phone and navigated to her text conversation with my husband. The messages started 8 months ago, just as she had said, but the content was far more damaging than I had imagined. He told me you were already separated, Megan said, her voice trembling. He said you had been living apart for a year, that you only stayed legally married for tax purposes. He said the divorce was just a formality that would be finalized any day. I read through the texts, each one a fresh wound. Derek had painted a picture of a loveless marriage to a cold, career-obsessed woman who had abandoned him emotionally years ago. He had promised Megan that they would be together properly by Christmas. He had told her he loved her. I'm not trying to excuse what I did, Megan continued. I should have verified his story. I should have asked more questions. But I was young and stupid, and I wanted to believe him. You're still young and stupid, I said, but there was no venom in it. Just exhaustion. I know. She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. And I'm not pregnant. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? I made it up. Last month, when I started suspecting that Derek wasn't being honest about your marriage, I told him I was pregnant to see how he would react. She let out a bitter laugh. He was furious. Told me I had ruined everything, that this wasn't part of the plan. That's when I knew something was very wrong. What plan? Megan hesitated, then swiped to another screen on her phone. I started paying attention after that, looking through his things when he wasn't watching. And I found these. She handed me the phone, and I found myself looking at photographs of documents. Bank statements showing large transfers from our joint account to one I didn't recognize. Credit card bills for purchases I had never seen. Jewelry, hotel rooms, trips to destinations I had never visited. And most damning of all, a screenshot of an email to a divorce lawyer sent 6 months ago, asking about the best strategy for protecting assets from a spouse with significantly higher income. My higher income. He's been planning this for months, I said, the pieces clicking into place. He wanted me to find out about the affair. He wanted me to be the one to file for divorce so he could play the victim. I think so, Megan agreed. He kept pushing me to be less careful, to leave things where you might find them. I thought he was just reckless, but now it all made a terrible kind of sense. I spent the next hour with Megan, learning the full extent of Derek's deception. He had been seeing other women too, at least two that Megan knew of, possibly more. He had gambling debts that he had hidden from me, which explained the mysterious withdrawals from our accounts. And he had been slowly, systematically, preparing to take everything he could in a divorce. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked finally. "You could have just walked away." Megan met my eyes. "Because I'm not the person he tried to turn me into. And because you deserve to know the truth, even if it hurts." We parted ways with an awkward handshake. Two women bound together by the worst experience of their lives. As I watched Megan walk away, I felt something shift inside me. The grief was still there, the anger and betrayal and bone-deep exhaustion. But underneath it all, a new feeling was emerging. Determination. Derek had underestimated me. He had assumed that I would be too devastated, too humiliated to fight back. He had expected me to slink away quietly and let him take whatever he wanted. He was wrong. I pulled out my phone and dialed my mother's number. "Lauren?" Her voice was worried. "What's happening? I've been waiting to hear from you." "I'm coming to Tampa," I said. "I need to get away from here for a while, clear my head. And then I'm going to figure out how to make Derek Mitchell regret the day he ever decided to cross me." "That's my girl," my mother said, and I could hear the pride in her voice. "Come home, sweetheart. We have a lot to talk about." I booked a flight for that afternoon, packed a bag at Nina's apartment, and headed for the airport. As the plane lifted off and Chicago grew smaller beneath me, I allowed myself one final moment of mourning for the life I had lost. Then I closed my eyes and started planning for the life I was going to build. My mother's house in Tampa was exactly as I remembered it. A modest bungalow with a screened-in porch, surrounded by palm trees and hibiscus bushes that bloomed in riotous shades of pink and orange. She was waiting on the front steps when my Uber pulled up, her silver hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her arms already open for a hug. "Oh, honey," she murmured as I collapsed into her embrace. "I've got you. I've got you." For the first time since that terrible night, I let myself cry. Really cry. Ugly, gasping sobs that shook my whole body and left my face blotchy and swollen. My mother held me through all of it, stroking my hair like she had when I was a child, murmuring words of comfort that I couldn't quite hear through the storm of my grief. When I finally exhausted myself, she led me inside and settled me on the familiar floral couch with a cup of tea and a fleece blanket that smelled like lavender and home. "Tell me everything," she said. And so I did. The telling took hours, interrupted by more tears and questions, and occasional breaks for food that I didn't want but forced myself to eat. My mother listened without judgment, her face shifting through expressions of shock, anger, and fierce protective love. "I always knew there was something off about that man," she said when I finished, "but I kept my mouth shut because you seemed happy." "I was happy," I admitted. Or I thought I was. "Now I don't know if any of it was real." "Some of it was real," she said firmly. "Your happiness, your love, those were genuine. The fact that he didn't deserve them doesn't make them less real." It was a comforting thought, even if I couldn't quite believe it yet. Over the next few days, I fell into a rhythm at my mother's house. I slept late, went for walks on the beach, and spent long evenings on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. I avoided my phone as much as possible, though Derek's messages continued to pile up. Increasingly desperate pleas to talk about this like adults, mixed with thinly veiled threats about making the divorce difficult if I didn't cooperate. On the fourth day, my sister Cassie arrived from Atlanta. She walked through the door with a bottle of wine and a fierce expression. "I'm going to say something, and you're not going to interrupt me," she announced, pouring 3 generous glasses. "I never liked Derek. I never trusted him. He was charming, sure, but it was the kind of charm that felt practiced, like he was performing a role instead of being a real person." "Cassie," I started. "I'm not done." She handed me a glass. "I should have said something years ago. When you got engaged, when you bought the house, when you started talking about having kids, I kept telling myself it wasn't my place, that you were happy and I should let you be happy. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't speak up." "Would I have listened?" I asked honestly. She considered this. Probably not. But I should have tried anyway. We hugged. The kind of fierce, tight embrace that only sisters can share. And then we settled in for what my mother called a strategy session. You need a lawyer, Cassie said. A good one. Someone who specializes in cases like this. Cases like what? Cases where the husband is a conniving snake who's been hiding assets and planning to screw over his wife. Cassie pulled out her laptop. I did some research. There's a woman in Chicago named Victoria Chen who's supposed to be brilliant. She has a 90% success rate and a reputation for being absolutely ruthless. I looked at the website Cassie had pulled up. Victoria Chen's photo showed a sleek, elegant woman in her 50s with sharp cheekbones and sharper eyes. Her biography listed 2 decades of experience in high-conflict divorce cases, with particular expertise in uncovering hidden assets and financial fraud. She looks expensive, I said. She is. But look at her testimonials. Half these women say she was worth every penny. I thought about the bank statements Megan had shown me, the transfers Derek had made without my knowledge. Book me a consultation, I said. 3 days later, I was on a video call with Victoria Chen herself. She listened to my story with an impassive expression, occasionally jotting notes on a yellow legal pad. First things first, she said when I finished. Have you accessed your joint accounts recently? Not since I found out. I've been afraid of what I might see. We need to do that now. I want you to log in while I watch. With trembling hands, I navigated to our bank's website and entered my credentials. What I saw made my stomach drop. Over the past week, Derek had transferred an additional $50,000 from our savings account to the unknown account I had seen in Megan's photos. Our checking account was nearly empty. The investment portfolio we had been building for years showed multiple large withdrawals. He's draining everything, I whispered. This is actually good news, Victoria said calmly. It shows clear intent to hide marital assets, which is illegal. A judge will not look kindly on this behavior. She walked me through the next steps with brisk efficiency. Emergency motion to freeze the remaining accounts, subpoenas for Derek's financial records, a forensic accountant to trace exactly where all the money had gone. There's something else you should know, Victoria said. I had my team do some preliminary research on your husband. His real estate business is in serious trouble. He's facing multiple lawsuits from clients who claim he misrepresented properties, and there are rumors of debts to some unsavory characters. Gambling debts? Among other things. Victoria's expression remained neutral, but I caught a flicker of something. Satisfaction, perhaps, at the prospect of a worthy adversary. Your husband is desperate for money, Mrs. Mitchell. Your money, to be specific. That's why he was so eager to claim the house. It's one of the few assets he can't hide or liquidate quickly. But I paid for most of it, I protested. My income has always been higher than his. The down payment came from my savings. Exactly. And we're going to make sure the court knows that. Victoria leaned toward the camera. Here's what I need from you. Gather every financial document you can find. Tax returns, bank statements, credit card bills, everything. I want records of every contribution you made to your joint assets. And I need you back in Chicago as soon as possible. I understand. One more thing. Victoria's voice softened slightly. This is going to get ugly. Your husband will say terrible things about you. He'll try to paint you as the villain, the cold workaholic who drove him into another woman's arms. You need to be prepared for that. I am, I said. And I meant it. The woman who had left Chicago 10 days ago might have crumbled under such an attack. But she wasn't the woman on this call. I had spent the past week grieving the death of my marriage, and the man I thought Derek was. Now it was time to fight for my future. I flew back to Chicago 2 days later, this time with my mother by my side. We stayed at a hotel downtown while Victoria's team worked on getting a temporary order that would allow me to enter my own home and retrieve my belongings. The process took 3 more days of legal wrangling, during which Derek sent increasingly frantic messages. His tone had shifted from pleading to threatening, hints about embarrassing revelations he could make public, warnings about how my career would suffer if this went to trial. But buried in the vitriol was fear. I could smell it, even through the screen of my phone. Derek was scared. Finally, on a rainy Thursday morning, I walked through the front door of the brownstone with a police officer and a court-appointed witness. Derek was nowhere to be seen. He had been ordered to vacate for the duration of my visit, but his presence lingered in every room. I moved quickly, efficiently, collecting documents from his office that he had clearly tried to hide. Behind a loose panel in his closet, I found a folder containing records of transactions he had never mentioned: cash withdrawals, transfers to offshore accounts, loans from people whose names I didn't recognize. But the most damaging discovery was in his desk drawer, hidden beneath a false bottom. A letter, handwritten, addressed to Megan. I know this has been hard, but just wait a little longer. Once the divorce is finalized and I have my share of Lauren's money, we'll start fresh. The house in Arizona is almost ready. She'll never find us there. I photographed everything and sent it to Victoria. Her response came within minutes. Perfect. This is exactly what we needed. That night, alone in my hotel room, I allowed myself a small, grim smile. Derek had built his entire plan on the assumption that I was too trusting, too heartbroken, too weak to fight back. He had never been more wrong about anything in his life. The Cook County Courthouse loomed ahead of me, its imposing limestone facade a testament to the weight of the proceedings about to unfold inside. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, letting the March wind whip through my hair, centering myself for what was to come. Ready? Victoria appeared beside me, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my first car, as I'll ever be. We climbed the steps together, my mother and Cassie following close behind. Inside, the hallway smelled of coffee and anxiety, packed with people in various stages of their own legal dramas. I spotted Derek near the courtroom doors, flanked by his lawyer, a balding man named Patterson who had a reputation for aggressive tactics and loose ethics. Derek looked terrible. In the 6 weeks since I had discovered his betrayal, he seemed to have aged a decade. His suit hung loosely on his frame, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. When he saw me, his expression flickered through several emotions: anger, fear, something that might have been regret, before settling into a mask of cold indifference. Lauren? He nodded stiffly. Derek. That was the extent of our interaction. Victoria steered me past him and into the courtroom, where we took our seats at the plaintiff's table. Judge Eleanor Hartley presided over the proceedings, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s known for her sharp mind and low tolerance for dishonesty. As the hearing began, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. Whatever happened today, at least the uncertainty would end. Patterson went first, painting a picture of a marriage destroyed by a workaholic wife who prioritized her career over her husband's emotional needs. According to his narrative, Derek had been driven to infidelity by years of neglect and loneliness. The affair with Megan was a desperate cry for connection, not a calculated betrayal. My client acknowledges that his actions were wrong, Patterson said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. But he asks this court to consider the circumstances that led him there. Mrs. Mitchell was rarely home, rarely present, rarely available to be a true partner in this marriage. I watched the judge's face as Patterson spoke, but her expression gave nothing away. Then it was Victoria's turn. Your Honor, opposing counsel would have you believe that my client is somehow responsible for Mr. Mitchell's choices. But the evidence tells a very different story. She walked the court through everything we had uncovered: the financial transfers, the hidden accounts, the letter to Megan outlining Derek's plan to flee to Arizona with my money. She presented testimony from forensic accountants showing that Derek had diverted over $150,000 from our joint accounts over the past 2 years. She submitted records proving that the down payment on our house, $120,000, had come entirely from my savings, despite Derek's claims of equal contribution. But the most devastating moment came when she called her surprise witness. The plaintiff calls Richard Donovan to the stand. Derek's face went white. Richard Donovan was Derek's business partner, a man I had met only a handful of times at company events. He took the stand with the air of someone who had been wrestling with his conscience and finally found peace. Mr. Donovan, Victoria began, can you describe your professional relationship with the defendant? Derek and I founded our real estate firm together 8 years ago, Richard said. But over the past 3 years, I've watched him make increasingly reckless decisions that have put our company at risk. Can you elaborate? Derek has a gambling problem. A serious one. He's been borrowing money from clients, from the business accounts, from anyone who will lend it to him. When I confronted him about it last year, he told me not to worry, that his wife had plenty of money, and he would handle it. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Did Mr. Mitchell ever discuss his marriage with you? All the time. He used to brag about how he had convinced Lauren to let him manage their finances. He called it his insurance policy. Richard's voice was heavy with disgust. He said as long as she kept working and he kept control of the money, he could do whatever he wanted. I felt my mother's hand close over mine, squeezing tightly. The testimony continued, each revelation more damning than the last. Richard explained that Derek had been planning to divorce me for over a year, but he had been waiting for the right moment, specifically for me to close a major deal that would boost our assets before he made his move. He wanted to maximize what he could take, Richard said. That was his exact phrase. Maximize the take. Patterson tried to discredit Richard on cross-examination, suggesting personal grievances and business disputes as motives for his testimony. But the damage was done. Derek's careful facade of the wronged husband had crumbled, revealing the calculating manipulator beneath. The next witness was Megan. I hadn't known Victoria planned to call her until that morning, and I had been apprehensive about what she might say. But as Megan took the stand, I realized she had her own scores to settle. Ms. Holloway, Victoria said, how did you first meet the defendant? He was my real estate agent, Megan replied, her voice steady. I was looking for my first apartment. He was charming and attentive, and when he told me his marriage was over, I believed him. When did you realize that wasn't true? Megan's eyes flickered to me briefly. About 2 months ago. I found evidence that Derek was still very much married, that he had been lying to me from the beginning. When I confronted him, he got angry. He told me I was ruining everything, that I needed to keep quiet until the divorce was final. Did he ever discuss his wife with you? Constantly. He told me she was cold, distant, that she didn't understand him. He said she was so focused on her career that she barely noticed he existed. Megan's voice hardened. But then I met her. I saw how devastated she was when she found out, and I realized that everything Derek had told me was a lie. Patterson objected multiple times during Megan's testimony, but Judge Hartley allowed most of it to stand. By the time Megan stepped down from the stand, Derek's reputation was in tatters. But there was one more revelation to come. Your Honor, Victoria said, approaching the bench, I have one final piece of evidence to submit. This document was discovered hidden in the defendant's home office. She handed a folder to the judge and a copy to Patterson. Derek craned his neck to see, and I watched the blood drain from his face as he recognized what it was. This is a signed agreement between Mr. Mitchell and an individual named Marco Ferretti, Victoria explained. It shows that Mr. Mitchell borrowed $200,000 from Mr. Ferretti at a 30% interest rate, using the marital home as collateral. My heart stopped. Without my client's knowledge or consent, Victoria continued, the defendant pledged their jointly owned property to secure a personal gambling debt. This document was never recorded with the county, and my client's signature appears to have been forged on the collateral agreement. The courtroom erupted. Patterson shouted objections while Derek tried to whisper frantically in his ear. Judge Hartley banged her gavel repeatedly, calling for order. When the chaos finally subsided, the judge fixed Derek with a stare that could have frozen fire. Mr. Mitchell, this court takes allegations of forgery and fraud extremely seriously. You will have an opportunity to respond to these claims, but I want to be very clear. If these allegations are substantiated, you will face consequences far beyond the scope of this divorce proceeding. Derek's lawyer requested a recess, which the judge granted. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Victoria allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. That went well, she said. Is it over? Not quite, but I don't think there's much more fight left in him. She was right. When we reconvened 2 hours later, Patterson approached the bench with a proposal. Derek was willing to concede the house and the majority of the marital assets in exchange for my agreement not to pursue criminal charges for the forgery. Victoria looked at me. It's your call. I thought about it. Part of me wanted Derek to face every possible consequence for what he had done. But a larger part of me wanted this to be over, wanted to close this chapter of my life and never look back. "I want the house," I said. "I want full restitution of every dollar he took from our accounts. And I want him to admit on the record that he was the one who destroyed this marriage, not me." Patterson conferred with Derek, who looked like he might be sick. Finally, reluctantly, Derek nodded. "My client agrees to the terms." Judge Hartley reviewed the settlement agreement carefully before signing off. "The marriage of Lauren Mitchell and Derek Mitchell is hereby dissolved. Property division will proceed according to the terms outlined. Mr. Mitchell, I strongly suggest you seek help for your gambling addiction and reconsider your life choices. This court is adjourned." The gavel fell, and just like that, it was over. My mother and Cassie rushed to embrace me as Derek slunk out of the courtroom, refusing to meet my eyes. Victoria shook my hand with genuine warmth. "You handled yourself beautifully in there," she said. "Most people would have crumbled under that pressure. I had a lot of help." As I walked out of the courthouse into the bright spring sunshine, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. My phone buzzed with a text from Nina. "How did it go?" "I won," I typed back. "He admitted everything. The house is mine." Her response was immediate. "Yes. Dinner tonight. My treat." I smiled and slipped the phone back into my pocket. Then I noticed another message. This one from a name I hadn't expected. Jennifer Walsh, VP of Global Marketing at Ardent Beauty. "Lauren, we met briefly at the industry conference in Los Angeles. I've been following your work at Lumiere, and I was wondering if you'd be interested in discussing a potential opportunity. Our New York office is looking for a new director of brand strategy. Would you have time for a call this week?" New York. A fresh start in a new city. A chance to build something entirely my own. I looked up at the Chicago skyline, thinking about everything this city had given me. My career, my friendships, the good years with Derek before everything went wrong. I would miss it. But maybe it was time for a change. Maybe it was time to become someone new. 3 months later, I stood at the window of my new apartment on the Upper West Side, watching the sunset behind the Manhattan skyline. The city stretched out before me in all its chaotic glory, a tapestry of lights and shadows, possibilities and promises. From this height, the world looked full of potential. The apartment was small by Chicago standards, a one-bedroom in a pre-war building with creaky floors and temperamental plumbing. But it was mine, chosen and paid for with money that belonged solely to me, decorated with furniture that held no memories of Derek Mitchell. The walls were painted a soft sage green, my favorite color. The bookshelves were filled with novels I had been meaning to read for years. A small, succulent garden lined the windowsill, each plant a tiny testament to new growth. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. A text from my mother. "Just landed safely. Thank you again for the visit, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you." She had spent the past week with me, helping me settle into my new life. We had explored the city together like tourists, eating our way through Little Italy and wandering the galleries of the Met, and taking the ferry to see the Statue of Liberty. But mostly, we had talked. Long, meandering conversations about life and love and the strange paths that bring us to where we are. "Your father did the same thing, you know," she had told me one evening as we sat in Central Park watching the joggers go by. Not the gambling, but the lies. The other women. The way he made me feel like everything was my fault. I had known my parents divorced when I was 8, but the details had always been vague. "Why didn't you ever tell me? I wanted to protect you." And honestly, I was ashamed for a long time. I thought I should have seen the signs, should have known better. She had smiled sadly. It took me years to realize that his choices weren't my responsibility, that I deserved better than someone who treated me like an afterthought. "How did you move on?" "One day at a time. One decision at a time. I focused on building a life I was proud of, even when it was hard. And eventually, I woke up one morning and realized I was happy. Genuinely, deeply happy in a way I had never been with him." I thought about that conversation now as I watched the city lights flicker to life below me. One day at a time. One decision at a time. My new job at Ardent Beauty had been everything I hoped for and more. Jennifer Walsh turned out to be a brilliant mentor, challenging me to think bigger and take risks I never would have considered at Lumiere. My team was sharp and creative, pushing me to grow in ways I hadn't expected. For the first time in years, I was excited to go to work every morning. The brownstone in Chicago had sold last month for well above asking price. Victoria had handled the sale with her usual efficiency, ensuring that every penny went into my account rather than toward Derek's mountain of debts. The last I had heard, he was living in a studio apartment in Schaumburg, his real estate license suspended pending an ethics investigation. Richard Donovan had bought out his share of the firm and was rebuilding the business without him. I didn't feel sorry for Derek. That surprised me sometimes. I had expected to carry more bitterness, more anger about everything he had put me through. But the truth was, I barely thought about him anymore. He was a chapter of my life that had ended, a lesson learned at great cost but not wasted. My phone rang and I smiled when I saw Nina's face on the screen. "Tell me everything about the new apartment," she demanded. "I need a full virtual tour." I laughed and spent the next 20 minutes walking her through each room, pointing out the vintage light fixtures and the clawfoot bathtub and the tiny balcony where I planned to grow herbs in the spring. "It's perfect," Nina said when I finished. "I'm coming to visit next month and I expect to be treated like royalty. Nothing less for my best friend." After we hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine and settled onto the couch with my laptop. I had started keeping a journal since the divorce. Not anything public. Just private reflections on my journey from that terrible night to where I was now. Writing had become a form of therapy, a way to process everything I had experienced and chart the course of my recovery. Tonight, I opened to a fresh page and began to type. 3 months ago, I thought my life was over. I had built everything around a man who turned out to be a mirage, a beautiful illusion hiding an ugly truth. When that illusion shattered, I didn't know who I was anymore. I had been Lauren Mitchell, successful marketing executive and devoted wife. Without the wife part, who was I? The answer, I'm learning, is that I'm still figuring it out. And that's okay. Maybe the best version of ourselves isn't something we find. It's something we build, piece by piece, choice by choice. Maybe the point isn't to know exactly who you are, but to stay curious about who you might become. A knock at the door interrupted my writing. I checked the time. Almost 8 o'clock. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door to find my neighbor from down the hall, a man named James, who I had met briefly when I moved in. He was holding a plate covered in aluminum foil. "I made way too much lasagna," he said with an apologetic smile. "Thought maybe you could help me solve the problem." I looked at the plate, then at James. He was a few years older than me, with kind eyes and gray streaks at his temples. We had chatted a few times in the elevator about nothing in particular. The weather, the building's ongoing battle with unreliable hot water, the best coffee shop in the neighborhood. "That's very thoughtful," I said. "Thank you. I'm also hoping to lure you into joining my trivia team. We play every Tuesday at O'Malley's, and we're desperate for someone who might actually know something about pop culture." I laughed, really laughed, the kind of unguarded joy that had been rare in recent months. I'm pretty terrible at trivia, but I appreciate the invitation. Terrible is exactly our skill level. You'll fit right in. He handed me the lasagna and retreated down the hall with a wave. I closed the door and stood there for a moment, the warm plate in my hands, an unexpected smile on my face. I wasn't ready for anything romantic. The scars from Derek were still too fresh, the lessons too recent. But I was ready for something. Friendship, community, the small connections that make a strange city feel like home. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was an email from Derek. I almost deleted it without reading, but something made me pause, made me want to know what he could possibly have to say after everything that had happened. "Lauren," the email began, "I know I have no right to contact you, and I'll understand if you don't respond, but I wanted you to know that I've started going to Gamblers Anonymous. I'm trying to become a better person, even though I know it's too late to fix what I broke between us. I'm sorry for everything. Not because I got caught, but because I hurt someone who deserved so much better than what I gave her. You were always too good for me. I just wish I had realized it before I destroyed everything. I hope you're happy in New York. I hope you find someone who appreciates what they have before it's gone. Derek." I read the email twice, then closed my laptop. Part of me wanted to respond, to tell him that his apology meant something, that I hoped he would find his way to a better life. But a larger part of me knew that responding would only keep a door open that needed to stay closed. Derek had made his choices. I had made mine. Our paths had diverged, and there was no going back. I carried the lasagna to the kitchen and served myself a generous portion. It was delicious, rich and hearty, the kind of comfort food that felt like a hug. I made a mental note to thank James properly tomorrow, maybe with some of the chocolate chip cookies my mother's recipe was famous for. After dinner, I returned to my journal. Someone told me recently that the truth doesn't break us, it sets us free. I didn't believe it at first. The truth felt like a wrecking ball, demolishing everything I thought I knew. But maybe that was the point. Maybe some things need to be demolished before something better can be built. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I'll stay in New York forever, or if I'll find love again, or if I'll achieve all the professional goals I've set for myself. What I do know is that I survived something I thought would destroy me. I came out the other side stronger, wiser, and more certain of my own worth. Derek thought he could use me. He thought I was too trusting, too naive, too wrapped up in my career to notice what he was doing. But he underestimated something fundamental about who I am. He underestimated my ability to adapt, to fight, to rise. He won't make that mistake again. Neither will anyone else. I closed the laptop and walked back to the window. The city sparkled below me. Millions of lives playing out in apartments and offices and restaurants. Somewhere out there, people were falling in love and breaking up, succeeding and failing, finding their way through the beautiful mess of being human. I was one of them now. Not a victim, not a cautionary tale, just a woman starting over, building a life one day at a time. My phone buzzed one more time. A calendar reminder I had set weeks ago and forgotten about. Happy 6-month anniversary of freedom. I smiled and raised my wine glass to the skyline. To new beginnings, I said aloud. Outside, the city hummed with possibility. Inside, I felt something I had almost forgotten how to feel. Peace. The truth had found me that night when I came home early from my trip. It had been brutal and devastating and world-shattering. But Victoria was right about one thing. It was also a gift. Because the truth didn't break me. It set me free.